All right. Well, happy Wednesday. It's Bill Maharis coming to you live from, yes, Pressbox Overtime. First foray as we continue, as I like to say, step up our game a little bit. This is our first podcast, going to be live on YouTube tonight. Not sure if we'll do it live every week, but I don't know. I kind of like doing things live. We'll have some fun. I got two great guys with me that know a lot more than I do, and I always enjoy. I think it's the first time I've had them on here together. But again, it is our first podcast. It's going to be on YouTube channel. Everything's Pressbox Overtime. Whether I did a good job on picking the name, or maybe I picked a name that nobody else wanted, I don't know. But in case you're new, and if you're not watching live tonight, and you watch this after we finish, you can join me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube channel, same name, Pressbox Overtime. And we're going to call these Wednesday nights, every Wednesday at 7. Again, whether we do it live or tape beforehand, and basically just called it Mic'd Up Inside the Press Box. So I want to introduce from last week, Chris Bonanno. Again, a lot of experience. Chris and I go back probably 10 years when I was the announcer at Rockledge. You're a Rockledge graduate, if I remember correctly.
That's correct.
We all have a little something in common. He's been a baseball coach at Cocoa High School. We all have a little bit of that in common as well. And he writes for the Hometown News. I saw you on one of those big cruise ships the other day.
Yeah, the Allure of the Seas is now at Port Canaveral. That was a fun time.
Man, that's bigger than my hometown. And I got Coach Doug Cook. We tried to get him on last week on our Twitter talks. He's got his, I think your grandchild helped you with all the technology. And again, we got a lot in common. Doug coached football at Cocoa High School. Doug is one of those unique individuals. I'm an alumni from Cocoa High School, did a little announcing at Rockledge High School. Son played at Rockledge. Doug, for 3 years, was a Cocoa High School student until the new Cocoa High School opened, and his senior year, Cocoa High School changed to Rockledge High School. So again, a unique situation, and hopefully we're going to do a show on that one time. What's it like to be a senior and you got new uniforms, a new name, and your rival is your old high school? So we're certainly glad to have Doug with us. So we all have a little bit in common. And again, we're glad
the first graduating class of Rockledge High School.
That's right.
Very first.
That's amazing. So, like I say, we got to get something going on that because that's a unique story. So before I get started, and we talked about this before we came live, just found out one of my favorite all-time basketball coaches, Bobby Knight, just passed at the age of 83. It must have just happened talking to Chris. I just got a pop-up 5-6 minutes ago on ESPN. You know, a lot of us, when we grow up, whatever our dads liked, we liked. People ask me if I fish. I don't fish. Only time I catch a fish, if it's between two slices of bread. My dad didn't fish. I don't hunt, barely surfed, but I love sports. My dad loves sports. And when he got out of the Army, he applied for 3 different schools. Only one school answered his letter, and that was Indiana University. So after the Army, my dad attended Indiana University for a year. Needless to say, I've been a Hoosier all my life. 1976, the last time anybody went undefeated. That was a big team back then. I think they ended up going 32-0. Now they play like 40 games. I think he's won over 900. Chris, correct me. I think he won 4 championships. I can't remember. 3 or 4.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to definitively state.
Yeah, I've got it popped up on the screen. I didn't do all my research. And again, he also coached one of the greatest coaches in the game. And of course, that was Coach K when he, at 24 years old, Bobby Knight became the head coach at Army, spent 29 years in Indiana. So, Bobby, thanks for the memories. There's not too many more that are like you. And we just wanted to get that out of the way. So let me take a quick look. We're going to talk about the college football playoff. First came out last night. I'm going to see if I can share my screen real quick in case some of our viewers tonight or some people that choose to watch this later have not seen this. Came out yesterday. So this is the rankings. I don't think there was really, in talking with the two of you and listening to ESPN this morning and late last night, I don't think the top 6 was a surprise. Maybe the way they came out, I had a little bit of a difference. But let me start with you, Chris. First thoughts when you saw it? Yes, no, kind of liked it, couple changes. What did you think, especially the top 6 when that came out last night?
So just focusing on the top six, I thought they got it right at number one with Ohio State. Now,
Yeah.
Maybe not like if you were to pick a team and you say, hey, what's the most impressive team? You would not pick Ohio State. But just based on who they've beaten, you look at Notre Dame, Penn State at home, giving them their only loss, and then not a vintage Wisconsin team, but it's still impressive to go up there and win at Wisconsin this week. I think they've had the hardest road, and I think that's a deserved number one.
Right.
Obviously, the Ohio State-Michigan thing will flesh itself out. I did think there was a little inconsistency here because the Michigan-Florida State-Washington thing is interesting to me because we're presumably putting Florida State ahead of Washington because they've had their non-conference win against LSU. They've had a little bit tougher road. Maybe we're dinging Washington a little bit because they haven't played too well in the past 2 weeks.
Right.
But if we're stressing non-conference schedules and difficult opponents, how do we put Michigan ahead of Florida State? Michigan has their best team that they've played thus far is Rutgers. Didn't play a Power 5 in the non-conference.
Right.
I personally would have liked to have seen. I think the team that is most aggrieved. I don't think anybody's truly aggrieved, but of any of the teams here, I would say Florida State maybe has the biggest gripe, at least of the top teams.
Right. Yeah, and I kind of agree. I think what's in Michigan's favor is they've won the games they're supposed to have won, and most of them they've won big. But I'm like you. I actually had Florida State actually right behind Ohio State. Cook, what do you think? You saw that come out last night? You like the top four? You like the way they were arranged, or what?
I don't think Ohio State needs to be number one. Georgia definitely has the best talent in the nation. Their defense is just phenomenal. I go back on YouTube and I watch these games. I break them down as a coach. I don't look at it as a spectator. I look at it as a coach, and I break it down. I look at how these players play and how they're coached and their tenacity. I just don't see it in Ohio. It's just I don't see them number one. I see Georgia number one. Florida State, I'm not a big Florida State fan, but they're pretty darn good this year.
Right.
Michigan, I think so as well. But I see Georgia winning the whole thing.
Yeah, and I think, and I call it the Ric Flair scenario. In order to be the man, you got to beat the man. So I think there's a little bit of that in the Georgia. And listen, let's face it, they had their best game this past weekend. Racking up. Yeah, Florida's not. Florida's a better than average team. Yes, it's a rivalry. 43 of the 20 those. So they kind of clicked on it, at the right end. But I'm like both of you. I kind of like Ohio State, just like Chris said. Notre Dame. I think Maryland's pretty good. They beat Maryland, Penn State, and when you look at Georgia, Kentucky. I mean, so Georgia, and Michigan, Rutgers, where Florida State, and I'm going to put Duke up there. LSU and Duke. So, but I think what's been impressive is these teams, even when you don't look at, or you look at who they've played, they've played pretty darn well. So, Chris, let me go back to you. Who do you think out of those top four has the best chance of not being there in January?
Well, just mathematically, we would have to say one of the Big Ten teams, right? Because they play each other.
Right.
The difficult thing is, I think Michigan's a better football team than Ohio State, but how in the world is all this scrutiny going to impact them with respect to the sign gate? Is that going to wear on the team? And they, before they get to Ohio State, are at Penn State. That's not going to be an easy game at all.
Right.
So even though I think Michigan's better, I think Michigan's got two tough games, but I'll say them just because of those two tough games and the fact that the media scrutiny on them is going to be outrageous, I think, from now on. And there's that slight lingering possibility you can't get out of your head that maybe the Big Ten says, hey, guys, you're not playing in our title game this year. I can't get that out of my head.
Yeah, a lot of money involved there. Coach Cook, what do you think? Out of those top four, and again, that Chris is right. That's kind of the way you look at it, unless, somebody, they beat each other but between 1 and 3 and 5 and 6, somebody's going to get another loss. Doug, who do you think might fall out of that top 4?
I think Ohio will. Michigan's going to beat them.
Okay.
And I still got Alabama. Alabama is still in my mind. So don't count Alabama out right now. I know they're down the list, but
right.
You still got an SEC championship game to play.
Right.
But I see Ohio being eliminated there. They can't beat Michigan.
And I looked at some of my stuff from last week when Chris and I did the Twitter talk. Georgia still has Missouri, Mississippi, and Tennessee. They've got 3 ranked teams left. Again, I'm like Doug. I think Georgia's really good. It's kind of like the post I had out earlier today. The new 4 teams that are in the Big 12, I think, are a combination 3 and 17. I think something like that. And I think
that Georgia has 5 All-Americans on defense.
Yeah, and they've lost
Look
how many
at that for a
the past
minute.
2 years?
Have you ever seen an All-American play?
Yeah.
Or have you ever coached an All-American?
Right. Well,
I haven't. I've coached some good players, but
right.
High school All-Americans I've coached. But for a college All-American, 5 of them on defense.
I know. Yeah, that's and then they're now all in Philadelphia, if I remember correctly.
Woo, man,
I'm like you though. And we're going to talk about this in a minute. You got 1 and 3 playing each other. You got 5 and 6. You got 7 and 8 just kind of sitting there. If they run the table, I really looking at that. And let me ask you, Doug, when you look at that ranking, do you see the possibility of anybody, let's say, past Alabama in the rankings making it in? I personally don't. I think it's going to be 4 of those top 8 teams. I don't see anybody past number 8 getting in.
No, I don't. I don't either.
Chris, what do you think? What do you think?
I've been on this train for a while. I'm not going to let one bad game throw me off of it. Keep an eye on number 11, Penn State.
Okay.
I think we've counted them out a little quickly.
Sure.
If Michigan comes there, I believe it's next week actually. And they come to Happy Valley, and if they're to get a win there, you could have a scenario where you could have 3 teams tied with 1 loss in the Big Ten East, and then at that point, it's who knows.
Right.
But an 11-1 team out of the Big Ten is going to get consideration, as is, by the way, the loser of that Michigan-Ohio State game, like they did last year, right? So I personally think one thing that we're potentially setting ourselves up for is 3 teams with 1 loss in the Big Ten at the end of the year.
Right.
And trying to sift through, obviously, whoever gets to the Big Ten championship and wins that, presumably over whoever comes out of the West.
Right.
But just trying to sift through, A, who goes to that game, and B, how many do we take out of that morass? Because I don't think I would be shocked if the SEC had anybody in consideration other than Georgia. Everybody's going to have 2 losses. The Pac-12 is beginning to get itself knocked out. We talked about that.
Right.
And the ACC is down to Florida State. Well, I shouldn't say that. Louisville still got 1 loss.
Yeah, right. And I'll go back to you, Doug. You know the SEC as good as anybody. And I'm going to parlay on what Chris just said. LSU 1 loss, Ole Miss 1 loss, Alabama. What if that could be a 3-way tie? I don't know what the magic formula is, but and that's why I kind of look at number 7, Texas. They've got, let me look here real quick. They've got Kansas State, TCU, Iowa State, and Texas Tech, and maybe plays Oklahoma again, which I think we might all agree that's going to go the other way. Do you see Bama, Doug, coming out of the West? I know you like Coach. You think he's going to get past LSU?
I think so. They're getting. Oh yeah, I absolutely. Alabama's getting better every week.
Yeah,
and you can't count out Sir Nick Saban. You can't count him out. He's a hell of a coach, and he's gonna surprise some people, I believe.
Yeah, and I think actually, let me take a look here. Yeah, Bama hosts LSU this weekend. So we've got a couple good games. I'm sure when you're down there watching your daughter play volleyball, you're going to have phone to your ear or ESPN app on or something.
Absolutely. I got YouTube TV on. I'll be watching for sure. But if you watch Nick Saban, when they go into the locker room at halftime,
right,
they make a lot of good adjustments. That's a sign of a good coach that can make adjustments at halftime and come out and play better. So, don't count them out.
No, I agree. So let's go. So Chris, we've talked about that a little bit. So past the first four, who's sitting there licking their chops? Because I'm like, now Chris brought up a good point though. He's looking at Penn State, number 11. That could possibly, and again, Ole Miss has only lost one game. Am I right? Or one.
They've only lost one game, and they're at Georgia. I mean, you got the opportunity. It's probably not like a super great opportunity to win, but if you were to win,
right. So that's so you like Penn State. Realistically, if somebody drops out of the top four, maybe two drop out. Who do you like in those next 6 or 7?
Well, I mean, your eyes immediately, gravitate towards 5, 6, right? You got to figure any team from the Pac-12 and how impressive was Oregon last week, going in there and just walloping Utah. I know without rising, and it felt like that was going to give at some point with the lack of offense, but still to go into they don't lose there very often, and to go in there and absolutely dominate them was impressive. But I think any team that gets out of the Pac-12 with one loss, you've got to take them as a serious threat. Now, obviously, we're actually already down to Washington and Oregon in that regard, because we had Oregon State take its second loss in the desert late. USC's got its second loss. UCLA's got its second loss. So we're down to Washington and Oregon. They have really tough schedules remaining. So I would say, each team with one loss. Now, the difficulty there, Oregon's non-conference, no good. Washington at least tried to schedule non-conference, but it didn't work out when you look at Boise's kind of and Michigan State isn't what you'd hoped it would be. But they, you at least give them the nod for trying. I don't know how much that matters, but I do think a one-loss Pac-12 champ gets in over any other conference other than a one-loss Georgia, just because of the past, and we've talked about it. Georgia's upcoming schedule, it'll fill itself in. So I would suggest to you they're first in line at one loss, and then what I think could hurt as we look down the line. We talk about Texas and OU. I'm not convinced OU is going to be in the game. I think they may have another loss coming. They're just really not impressive since that Texas game at all. But the overall really, really weak strength of the Big 12 this year. There's, you're looking at Kansas maybe a little bit, but there's so many teams in there. I mean, you're looking at potentially a Oklahoma State team that blown out at home by South Alabama, and they play Oklahoma this week. And if they beat Oklahoma, they're probably going.
Well, and you got to look at this too, and I'm going to get to Doug and talk a little bit about the ACC. And I heard this the other day. That ain't helping Texas any. Because Oklahoma now is losing. And you're right. Number 9 Oklahoma is at number 22 Oklahoma State. That's going to be huge. And I think before I go to Doug, I think one point you bring up, it's kind of like the mindset we had about the SEC in the past. We were so dominant. I don't know if we're quite as dominant this year, but we said, hey, listen, whoever makes it into the SEC championship game, if they're both undefeated and one barely loses, they should both go. And I think we're looking at the Pac-12 like that now, because they've had 6 or 7 teams that have been ranked at the same time. So, Doug, let me have you put your ACC hat on. I'm looking here at number 13. Just like Chris said, Louisville's only lost one game. I mean, they're like Mississippi. They kind of control their own. Doug, you think FSU? And I think I've got FSU as number 2. And I had a conversation with my friend Jimmy today, who is a big FSU fan. He said, well, Miami and Florida are rivalry games. I get it. But I think they've got an easy path. if Louisville only has one loss and they meet in the championship game, what do you think, Doug? If they beat FSU, I don't know. Are they in?
Well, I'm not a big FSU fan. I love Bobby Bowden. He was my mentor when I coached, and I sent a couple kids up to Florida State. But Florida State has way too much ammunition.
Yeah,
way too much. A lot of speed. Great quarterback. They've got the attitude. Also, they're not gonna get beat.
Right.
And the tradition of Florida State. You take it in that locker room. I'd love to be in their locker room prior to a game situation because, man, those guys get fired up.
Right.
They don't get down. They don't get down. The personality of that team, they don't get down on themselves, and they fight till the final second.
Right.
And
right.
That's a tough team to beat, man. They might even be in the finals.
Well, and
they might be fighting for that national championship, man.
Right. And you and I have talked, about Coach Napier, and I think we all agree, you know what, I'm not that distraught over the Georgia loss. I know I picked them to win, Florida to win. Listen.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
I'm not working at MGM. I'm not I'm not on, DraftKings or nothing. So I don't have a reputation to lose. But I will say this, and Doug, you can, as a coach, you can pipe in. To me, Norville, he has done what most of us hope our new coaches will do. First year, not so good. Second year, okay. Last year, really good. And now, and it's taken 4 years. I mean, to me, if you give somebody time, like we keep talking about Napier, I don't know, Doug. I think he's done it the right way, and he is right where I would think an AD wants him to be.
Yeah, he's done a great job. He should get National Coach of the Year, I think. But, it does take time. I'm not a Napier fan simply because every time I listen to him talk, he puts me to sleep. I don't even have to take sleeping pills for that guy. But I don't know how he is in the locker room, man. If you can't get your boys fired up, but he knew going into Georgia that he was going to have a tough go at it. You know what I'm saying? Because he gambled more than I had ever seen him in that Georgia game. Right. But Florida State, they're going to be tough to beat, man. I'm telling you.
Yeah, I think like you. When I watch Travis, there's no fear in his eyes, no matter what the score is. So, Chris, I think we talked about this a little bit before. Out of those 5, let's say, of course, we got Ohio. Let's say Ohio State or Michigan runs the table. The other one has one loss. Georgia runs the table. Florida State, Washington or Oregon runs the table. Is an undefeated Pac-12 going to jump above a one-loss Big Ten, you think?
I think, this is my personal opinion, I think Washington controls its own destiny right now, especially when you consider it's got 2 Big Ten teams ahead of it. Obviously, if Washington wins out, they're going to be there, winning what, in my opinion, is the best conference in the country this year. Right. And you're probably going to have another win over Oregon since they've and who wouldn't want to see that game again, right? The last ever Pac-12 game in Las Vegas will be Washington versus Oregon. But I think that's probably what we're heading for. I think, it's kind of a very similar dynamic to what Texas and Oklahoma have, where Texas lost to Oklahoma, but if they played again on a neutral field, you'd probably take Texas. Easy. I think the same thing can be said about Oregon and Washington. If you played them on the same field right now, given the way Washington has looked, really struggling with Arizona State and Stanford the last 2 weeks, right? Probably the 2 worst teams in the Pac-12. I think that's how you'd go. One thing I do want to point out, just if I could for a second, go back to the ACC. So Louisville's got one loss, and they've got a great non-conference win over Notre Dame.
Yep,
smoked them. They've got Kentucky as well. So that's a pretty good. That would be a pretty good win. But the interesting thing is, I don't know. It kind of went a little unnoticed because Notre Dame's kind of under the radar a little now.
Right.
Notre Dame beat Pittsburgh 58-7.
Yeah.
And that's a terrible Pitt team. How in the world did Louisville go up there and lose by 17? That's a really bad loss. They're 2-6.
Right.
And I just wonder if push came to shove, if they could overcome something like now.
Right.
If you were to theoretically beat an undefeated Florida State team in the ACC title game, maybe. But and if you look at Louisville's remaining schedule,
right,
they got Virginia Tech in a game that is a lot bigger for the ACC title than people realize this week. Because Virginia Tech is actually maybe going if they win.
Come along. Yep.
Yes, Virginia, Miami. They're at Miami, which is going to be a tough one.
Right.
And then they get Kentucky. So that's doable to get 11-1. So they might there might be some shout in there as far as that's concerned. But as far as to your original question, I didn't mean to get off track.
No.
But let's just say hypothetically the SEC went out, Georgia, the Michigan-Ohio State winner wins out, Florida State wins out. Somebody from the Big 12 goes 12-1. Let's just say Texas and let's just say Washington. I think the Big 12 is the one that's left out.
Yeah, I kind of agree. And whether it's just that loss to Oklahoma now looks really bad unless they just plaster them against the wall. I think the depth too. I'm kind of like you. I think they'd be the last ones out. Doug, what do you think? Who do you think out of the 5 conferences is probably going to be the last one looking in?
Well, I think the SEC is the strongest, best talent, most speed, toughest. I think they have the toughest. I mean, Florida's got one of the toughest schedules in the nation.
Yeah.
And I was looking at Indiana. They were pretty weak schedule to me. Even Georgia. I mean, Georgia, their schedule hasn't been that tough, but I don't know. I don't see the Big Ten doing much really.
You mean the Big 12 or the Big 10?
I mean Big 12. Big 12. Yep.
Yeah.
I don't see them. I don't see them doing much.
I think we all agree on that. But kind of to Chris's point, Ole Miss, and again, I know they've only lost 1 game. I don't really think of Ole Miss as like going to be amazing. Let's say they run the dang table. Let's say they go into the championship game and they beat Georgia. It's kind of like the scenario with Louisville beating Florida State. Do they look at Louisville and go, God, we got to put them in? Or, now you might have a real ugly Final Four.
I don't see Ole Miss doing that. In the Ole Miss case, for them, I would argue at this point, Ole Miss controls their destiny. However, their destiny involves beating Georgia twice.
Correct. Yeah, I'm looking. They've got LSU, Georgia.
They've already played LSU.
Well, that's right. They beat LSU.
They've got A&M this week.
A&M, yeah. So, like I say, I don't know if that'll happen or not, but So I think I asked you this, Chris. So, favorite 1-loss team? You still got your eye on the Nittany Lions.
I do, and I think I'm going against the now. Let me. I should rephrase. I think potentially the best of all those teams you have listed as the 1-loss team. I think the best team is Texas.
Okay.
But I think, and I think winning at Alabama, even though I personally think Alabama is going to lose this weekend to LSU. I think LSU's got too much offense for them. But when you go in and you look at Penn State, really, really tough defense. I mean, that didn't change in the Ohio State game.
Right.
Good running game with Singleton, an emerging quarterback. And I think, okay, they lost by a touchdown in Ohio State. We're just going to give up at No, absolutely not. We think so highly of Michigan's been the most dominant team. Well, when Michigan goes in there, let's just say they lose, how far is Penn State going to shoot up those rankings? Very far. Right. So I sort of, we all know everyone's going to be watching that game. I think it's for whatever reason they're making it a noon game because Fox has this idea that every big game has to be noon. It's just awful.
Yeah. And it's 11 o'clock their time. I'm like, what the heck?
Yeah, you got Colorado playing USD at 10 in the morning. It's like, come on, But I digress. But I think Penn State's kind of lying in the weeds right now. You haven't really, kind of sputtered against Indiana last week, but have some, you get that Michigan win, and I think things really turn around in a hurry. The one thing that may hurt them, they played West Virginia non-conference. That's all right. We'll give them that, right? but the depth of the Big Ten isn't super amazing. You get past those top three, and we don't have another team up there, right? You're looking at who might the Big Ten West champ be.
Right.
Might it seriously be 133rd in the country ranked Iowa right now? Maybe, Minnesota. What are we doing in the Big Ten West? So I think the depth of the Big Ten could hurt them a little bit. But when you get a win like that, I just don't think you can count them out, especially since I really don't see any other landmines for Penn State to go.
So let me ask you, Doug. I know Doug's a big Bama fan, and I tell you what, I don't think they're going to do it. Missouri, I think it's Georgia. Yeah, Georgia hosts them this week. But so, Doug, let's go with Alabama. Alabama runs the table. Let's say they beat Georgia, touchdown, 10 points. Is that enough then to knock Georgia out and Alabama goes? Or do you see a scenario that maybe both, if Alabama goes the whole way and wins, that they could both go?
Well, I think Alabama would have to go if they knock off Georgia.
Yeah, I think so.
They would have to, but chances of that happen, I don't know. It's like I said, Georgia is loaded with talent.
Doug, and you and I have talked. There's really not been anybody, maybe Michigan, because of their schedule. And again, it's just the nature of playing the Power 5. Nobody has looked dominant every week. But like Doug and I talked, and I'll let Doug expand some. But you know what? You're still winning. You're winning your conference games. You're doing it week in and week out. And like you say, something about Georgia. South Carolina played them tough the first half. I think they're up by 10, 12. Georgia just kind of like that FSU, Doug. They just got that it. They're not going to go away quietly.
No, and you look at their coaching staff. They've got some great coaches. Will Muschamp, probably one of the best defensive coaches in the nation.
Right.
That guy is phenomenal, and they realize you win with defense.
Right.
Defense is for the dough, offense is for the show, and that's their philosophy on winning. And any great team has a great defense, so they're going to be tough to beat. I'm not saying they can't be beat. I think if you make any mistakes, in which they make very few mistakes, very few penalties as well, so they're going to be tough to beat.
So let me ask you. We got let me think here. Today's November 1st, right? Holy mackerel! So we got about 6 weeks, Doug, before the regular season and the conference championships. Today, you got that little 8-ball in front of you, and you're taking it up and flipping it over. Who do you, after all is said and done today, what 4 teams do you like based on their schedules and what you talked about?
Well, I think the 4 you have listed there. I think right now, I'm okay with that.
Okay,
but I see Georgia and Florida State playing for the national championship.
Yeah, I kind of like them as my top 2 today. Chris, who do you see shaking out? Do you see 5 or 6 moving up?
So I do think Georgia will win out. I think Georgia will beat whomever the West representative is in the SEC championship game. So they'll be in. I know, we thought maybe they'd slip a little bit without Brock Bowers. Didn't look like it against Florida. It's not a foregone conclusion that they get through the schedule. And I would say watch out for Missouri to give them a game. They're not going to win, but I think Missouri can be competitive like they were last year, more than competitive. They scared the heck out of Georgia last year. I've said, I think Michigan is probably that team to drop. I'll say that Michigan won't make it. And I think as well, one thing we have to consider, Michigan's not getting any benefit of the doubt. If we're sitting there that Saturday night before the commit, and we have, Herb Street and all them on there, and we're trying to drum up, guess who's not getting in? Michigan. Right. They want nothing to do with that if they can help it.
I almost, and that's a good point. If there's going to be a one-loss team not to make it, that might be the one loss team, that
Yeah.
that doesn't.
If we could deal without that, that would be great. And again, there is still, in my mind, the slight possibility that something is going to be done to them to take this out of their hands. But I don't think it'll happen, but it's non-zero. So there's that. So I like Georgia. I do think Florida State is going to run the table. And when although I would say this, I'm going to be a homer here for just a second. Miami's got the talent. Miami's got the talent along the offensive lines. They're one of the few teams that is their offensive line is really, really good. It just can Miami stop doing the self-inflicted stuff for 3 hours up there? It is the question mark, but they do have the talent to hang in, and I think Florida's got the talent at the Swamp as well, especially in a rivalry game. You've got nothing to lose, really. A 7-8 win Florida team, maybe. Let it all hang out, and I think, they've been a little bit better than I thought they'd be. So, but I do think ultimately Florida State runs the table. Louisville, I don't see being able to beat Florida State. So we'll say Georgia, Florida State. I'm going to say Ohio State now. And my final team is going to be the Oregon Ducks. I think the Oregon is playing so well right now. There's something in my head that says watch out for Oregon State to get the ultimate revenge on Oregon as they leave the last game of the year and knock them out, because Oregon State's defense is salty. But Oregon looks the part right now. And I would say if one team were that number 5 team would be Texas. And I think Penn State will go 11-1 and be right there as well. So I think we'll be talking about. I think it'll come down to a discussion about Oregon and Texas, because they'll both have one loss. Penn State, or the loser Michigan, Ohio State, will also have one loss, but we won't give them as much credit because they're not a conference champ. So I think it's really going to come down to the Ducks and the Longhorns, and I think the Ducks are going to get the nod because of conference strength. So I think it'll go. I'll spell it out even more. We'll say Ohio State 1, Georgia 2, Florida State 3, and Oregon 4. That's your final 4, I think.
So I'm kind of with you both. I got Georgia as 1. I got FSU as 2. Again, because if Georgia beats Missouri, Mississippi, Tennessee, and let's say Alabama, I mean, that's pretty much running the table. Florida State, just based on, like Doug said, they look good. Miami, Florida, are they going to give them a run for their money? I don't know. I like Michigan, again, taking all the sign gate out of the way. And then I like Oregon. I think Oregon is playing better ball than Washington as far as if they meet again. Like Doug and I have talked, Florida, God bless them, this is going to be the only game they're going to be favored. I just hope that if they don't beat Arkansas, they don't give up the ghost. But we got plenty more of those coming up. So
very
quick, before we close, Doug, so we talked a little bit about Steingate. You were coach. I think the real issue is it's against the rules. And if this stuff ends up being true, that this kid has gone to like 30 games, and if that really is, dressed up in a Central Michigan University shirt and hat on the sideline, wow.
I think that's pretty cool. I mean, I hope they don't come back and investigate me, because I sent a few folks out. Football. We're in a new age where football is turning into a bunch of pansies. You can't use your helmet to tackle. Pro Bowl. They're playing 2-hand touch. The whole country is becoming pansies. But back then, back in the day, it was a battle, man. We played Merritt Island. It was a battle, It was a battle, man. Come on. And we sent Merritt Island sent, they were in the I remember I was at Rockledge High School coaching with Bill McKnight. Merritt Island had coaches up in the trees there, on the west side. We chased them out of the trees. It's all part of the game. It's like Deion Sanders said, you could give them a plan.
Oh, nope. Let's see. He's coming back. Is he coming back? We'll see if he comes back. Hold on. There he is. He's back. Yeah, like Deion Sanders.
Making a big deal out of nothing, man. It's they all do it. They all spy on each other, And any way they can get an advantage, they will. Like I said, I just hope they don't send FBI by my house, in reference to me sending people out. But we got some good information about that. We would spy on Palm Bay. That was always a big game with us, either Rockledge or Cocoa, where I coached. And even at Merritt Island, we would go spy. There used to be before they built the new stadium at Palm Bay across the street, there was a little 7-Eleven there, and we'd take a van. One of the coaches had a van, and we'd be, we had our binoculars, and we were writing down plays that they, a lot of teams, they put in new plays on Thursday, Wednesday, Thursday, put in a little different twist. So we were getting their information that way. So I don't think it's a big deal. There's bigger things to think about than that. But that's just my feeling.
So Chris, last thing, and I should have researched why it is the rule. My guess is because they didn't want anybody to get crushed real early. But you got James Madison, 35 minutes down from my hometown. They're located in Harrisonburg, Virginia, right off of I-81. Undefeated. They are. What do they come in at? They didn't make the top. They didn't make because they can't play. That's right. But they're ranked. I forgot where they're ranked. But they can't go to a bowl game. They can't go the first 3 years. What do you think, Chris? I don't know why it's out there like that. I don't know why that would even be an issue. Why would you make somebody sit out?
I don't. I'm having a difficult time rationalizing why that would be. And one thing I think of immediately when I think about James Madison, everybody remembers when Purdue lost as a 1 seed last year to the 16 seed Fairleigh Dickinson. Fairleigh Dickinson wasn't supposed to be in the tournament. It was supposed to be somebody else from their conference, but they weren't allowed to because of the very same thing. And who are we punishing? Who asked for this? Nobody asked for that. You're punishing the kids, and you're killing these programs because how are they supposed to recruit under those circumstances? So if you see James Madison go 4-8 a couple years from now, thank this, because that's just really, really wrong. And even think about, so it's not great this year because James Madison have an outside chance of making that New Year's Six this year. Next year, if we're transforming ourselves a year ahead, may be costing them a spot in the playoffs, believe it or not. Because you look at right now, who would be in the playoffs? James Madison is not that far off from I believe it's Tulane this week, at 24, and Air Force at 25, and probably they don't go beyond 25. But James Madison, I would imagine, is not too far behind. Do have a win over Virginia as well, so there is that power. A Virginia team that I've been harsh on them, but I will give them credit. They are getting their act together.
And in all fairness, not to interrupt you, James Madison is probably not on there because they know they can't go to a bowl game. So if they were bowl eligible, it would be interesting to see, where they would land. But I'm like you, you usually do that as a penalty, and Doug knows this, and we had a attendant here in Brevard 20 years ago. If you change schools, you sat out a year. So it was to negate that from happening. But now you got these teams moving up. I'm thinking hey, if you get the first, I'm like, I'll have to do a little research for next week. Why is that? I'm like you. I don't really know. Real quick, just for the people that might watch this later, a couple of games to look. We got Texas at Kansas State, Ohio State at Rutgers. Rutgers. Listen, who would have thought Rutgers, Maryland, Florida, Duke have better records than Clemson at this time of the year? Oklahoma at Oklahoma State, like Chris said. Georgia hosts Missouri. That might be interesting. Washington at USC. I don't know. USC have anything left in the tank? And Alabama hosts LSU. So, Doug, real quick before we sign off, what last words of wisdom do you have about college football today?
Well, that's a good question. I do a lot of studying in reference to the game, NIL, transfer portal, and unlike one of my friends out in West Melbourne, I do try to change with the time. I'm not crazy about the not being able to use a face mask to make a tackle I know that Deion Sanders' son was thrown out of the game in the first quarter. I'm a Buff fan too, So he was thrown out. It wasn't a vicious hit. His helmet came up and hit the face mask, and the other kid walks away, goes back to the huddle, and he goes on the sideline. That's an impact player. That really bothers me as far as college football is concerned. But I think there should be some changes made. Some of the rules that they have now, and I'm sure they're discussing it. The NIL money and the transfer portal and all this kind of stuff, because it's going to get out of control eventually. Only the schools with money are going to have the great teams. So I don't know. It's things are changing.
Yeah,
things are changing, and hopefully, they'll come up with some ideas to get it back where it should be.
Yeah.
And I don't have any problem with a kid getting money for playing college football. I have no problem with that. If a coach is making $12 million off the talent of a player, why not? Why not give him a couple dollars for a movie or something, or a date? I have no problem with that.
I get it.
But
so, Chris,
hopefully things will.
Well, no, and I'm like you. I'd like to see it spread around a little bit more. Some of the schools, I think Miami last year had an NIL in place, Texas Tech, everybody got the same amount. I always thought that's what it was for, like Doug said, so they would have that discretionary money. I didn't know we were going to make millionaires out of these kids,
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I like it. I like what's going on. Some of it.
Yeah,
but
we'll see. Chris, what do you think? I know. Chris, we got 6 weeks left in the season. What are you excited about seeing what might happen in the next 6 weeks?
I would like to talk about what's going to happen next week. And I want to read this list of games. These are all games that will happen next week. Okay. Ole Miss at Georgia, Miami at Florida State, Utah at Washington, USC at Oregon, Tennessee at Missouri, Florida at LSU, Penn State and Michigan. Sounds pretty good, right? That sounds like the Saturday of a season right there, pretty much, right?
Not to interrupt you, I think Doug and I are going to have that split screen on YouTube. Working on that.
I got to come on over to the man cave and let's watch some games, man.
So, Chris, what do you? I mean, we're going to shake it up next week, is what you're telling me.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're gonna know a lot about what's going on next week, and there have been some weeks that it's not like any college football season. Some weeks are a little bit more action packed. I would say this one's kind of in the middle somewhere. But next week looks really, really good. Like if you're game day, then we get into do they want to go to a Fox game or an ESPN game? Yeah, that's kind of that. But you have your pick as to where you want to go next week. Relative to that, there's no head scratching. I was actually a little surprised they went to Alabama this week. I wasn't sure they'd go there. I thought maybe they'd take Missouri or Georgia. But they're in Georgia, so it's kind of tough. But overall, I'm really looking forward to next week. One other thing I want to mention. My favorite thing that I have been following this year in college football ended on Monday. Iowa. Brian Ferentz and the contract that he signed, that he had to average 25 points a game or he was going to be let go by the old athletic director. And if you've watched Iowa offensively, now they're without their quarterback, Cade McNamara, a couple of their starting tight ends. They are a chore to watch offensively. They are dead last offensively. And it had become, what's crazy about it, they're a bad call away from being 7-1. They should have beat Minnesota. It was a terrible call on the fair catch, and Iowa should have beat them. Yeah. So I feel bad for Brian Ferentz, even though it probably wouldn't have worked out at the end of the year. I feel like he's losing his job because of that bad call on the fair catch interference.
That was harsh.
So that stinks. But I did just want to make everybody aware of the fact that team that fired its offensive coordinator with 4 games left, or at least told him he wouldn't be coming back, and is dead last in offense. That may be the last roadblock for Michigan, Ohio State, or Penn State to get to the college football playoff, and that's where I lose a little bit of. You would never see that in an SEC title game. You've seen it before in a Big Ten title game, and you may see it again.
Yeah, I think you're right. Next week's games are going to answer a lot of the questions that we are talking about tonight. But before we go, I would like to wish Dennis Rodman a happy birthday. As you can see, I've got on one of his shirts.
I was wondering who that was.
It's Dennis Rodman. Yeah, I've had this shirt for many, many years, but I would like to wish him a happy birthday. So I just wanted to get that out.
One of the greatest rebounders at all, and as a daughter that is going to be elite on our national soccer team, as far as that goes. Well, episode 1 don't look like we got any views, but that's all right. We're gonna post this on my YouTube channel. And again, Chris and Doug, I can't thank you enough. You did a great job. I think we hit all the parts, and for those that maybe don't get to watch and get up and in the morning, I'd like to say, if you want to learn a little bit about college football playoffs, I think we had a little bit to offer tonight and a little bit more. And don't forget, follow Pressbox Overtime on YouTube right here. We call this every Wednesday at 7, mic'd up inside the Pressbox. We're on Facebook and Twitter. Like I always say, we're not big in numbers, but we're stout in passion. We love what we do. So, Chris, I want to say thanks. Coach Cook, thanks. Hopefully we'll do this again next Wednesday at 7. I'm sure we're going to be meeting and texting back and forth this weekend. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate it. Again, remember, sports, it's more than just a game. I'm Bill Maharis for Doug Cook and Chris Bonanno. Pressbox Overtime. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
See you.
See ya.